Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you haven't seen me before, my name is Heather. If you have seen me before, then you already know that my name is Heather, so welcome back. For this week's video, I wanted to talk about something LGBTQ+ related because that is what the majority of my channel is, and I really like talking about this because I know it is helpful for you guys. And I get lots and lots of questions about figuring out your sexuality and how to figure out your sexuality. So I thought I would compile a list today of things that I wish I knew when I was figuring out my sexuality. If you don't know who I am and you've never seen me before, I am Heather, as I said at the beginning of this video, and I identify as a lesbian or gay, whatever you want to say. And I came out in 2017, so it's been a little bit since I came out, which is kind of crazy to think about. I didn't think it had been that long. And I'm going to try and be as real as possible with this video because, like I said, these are things that I wish that I knew when I was figuring out my sexuality. So hopefully listening to these things will help you a little bit because I feel like they would have helped me if I had heard these things when I was figuring it all out a few years ago. Anyways, without further ado, let's get into the video. So the first thing that I want to say is that it isn't a race. And I feel like on surface level, you already know this, but it can be kind of hard when you want to know so badly how to identify and you're constantly thinking about it and you just wish that you could figure it all out overnight, but that's likely not going to happen. It is very, very confusing figuring out your sexuality, which is probably why you're watching this video. I know I watched tons of videos like this when I was figuring things out. But yes, it takes time to think about things and figure things out, and it's not a race. You're not competing against anyone. You don't have to have things figured out by a certain date, by a certain age, by a certain time. It's just not like that. You may see people who seem to have figured things out really, really fast, and you may want to be like that too, but everybody's journey is different and everybody's experience is different. So you're not going to necessarily figure things out at the same speed as somebody else or in the same way as somebody else because everyone has different circumstances and it's a different process for everyone, if that makes sense. This one might be a little controversial, but you're never going to be 100% certain. And let me explain this before you all freak out. Something as confusing as sexuality is never going to be laid out 100% perfectly for you, saying, you are this, you should identify as this is your sexuality. It's not that easy, even though we might wish it would be that easy, but it isn't. For so long, I would go back and forth thinking that I was a lesbian and thinking that I was bisexual, and it was just such a taxing process, and I just kept going over and over and thinking, well, what if I change my mind? Like, what if I do like boys instead of just girls, blah, blah, blah. And I just found that waiting for the moment where I was 110% positive was just never really going to come. And I just had to sort of go with what label felt most comfortable for me. And for me, that was a lesbian or gay. And this was a hard pill to swallow for me because I thought that during this coming out process, during this figuring out my sexuality process, I thought that one day I was going to be absolutely positive and have no doubts in my mind, and so I was waiting for that for so long, but then I just realized that that just isn't really how it works. I just sort of encourage you to get to a point where you are comfortable with the label you have chosen if you are choosing to label yourself. And I think that's the most important thing, rather than waiting until you're 100% positive and can completely say, I'm never going to be with a man ever, because sexuality is very fluid and it's on a spectrum. I know you've heard all of those things before, but it's kind of difficult to 100% guarantee for your entire life that you're going to be a certain way. And going off of that last point, you're allowed to change your mind. And I know, it's crazy. You think that when you come out, you have to be sure and positive for the rest of your life, but figuring out your sexuality is confusing as hell, especially in this heteronormative world that we live in, where everything is and everyone is telling you that being straight is the normal thing and that's how you're supposed to be. It can be really hard to decode and figure out inside of yourself everything and who you are and who you like and what your identity is. It's very, very difficult. So it is completely okay to come out as one thing, and then as you learn more about yourself and discover more things about yourself, realize that that label doesn't really fit you that well anymore and change it later on. That is completely normal, and so many people have done it because it's so confusing. It doesn't mean that you're any less valid or any less part of the LGBTQ plus community. It just means that you're normal and you're figuring things out, and that is completely okay. And you also don't need to label yourself. And I know that this can also be really hard because when I was figuring things out, I wanted to have a label. I wanted to be able to say, I am this, I am gay. But that is not necessarily needed. Labels can be helpful for some people, but for some people, they really aren't helpful, and that's completely okay. It's okay to just be you and not feel the need to label your sexuality or label your identity. That's completely fine, and anyone who tells you differently is wrong, because it just is solely based on what is comfortable for you. And if it's comfortable for you to label yourself and say, I'm bisexual, I'm gay, I'm queer, whatever, then that's okay. But it's also okay for you to just be you and not say, have a label. This is your journey, this is your process, and it's all about what makes you comfortable and what makes the most sense for you. So don't let other people's experiences or other people's opinions about it affect how you view yourself and how you want to identify, because that is for you to decide and for you to figure out, not anybody else. And this one I think is very important, and I so wish somebody had told me this, but your sexuality is not the most important thing about you. Yeah, I said it. I know that it may feel like it is when you're obsessing over it and trying to figure things out, when you're figuring out your sexuality. I know for me, I felt like this was the most important part of my life, and it was consuming me because my every thought was about, well, am I this? Am I this? When am I going to come out? Blah, 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 blah. But I want you to remember that you have so many other things about yourself that are way more interesting and that make you you, and your sexuality isn't the defining characteristic of your personality, of who you are. Another thing that I wish that I knew is that you don't have to do it alone. And I know that when you're figuring out your sexuality, you're probably not going to be ready to talk to anyone in your personal life or come out to anyone, and obviously that's completely okay, but that still doesn't mean that you have to do it alone. There are so many resources online, like LGBTQ plus chat groups, LGBTQ plus helplines that you can call and talk to. You can even reach out to people like me, and I'll listen to you and chat with you about it, because I find that that can be really helpful to just vent and get your feelings out and actually speak to another person about it instead of keeping it all inside of you, because with a lot of things, keeping it all in is not super helpful, and being able to actually speak about it with somebody and sort of go through your thought process and get things out can be really, really helpful and help you to feel less isolated. Another thing that is important to remember is that there is no one way to be gay. And I feel like this is something that a lot of LGBTQ plus people struggle with when they are figuring things out. You might feel like you're a lesbian, but then you see lesbians on TV who don't look like you or who act in different ways than you, don't like the same things as you, and then you feel like you can identify as lesbian, but that is not how it works. And everyone is unique, everyone is different, and there are so many people in this community, and we're all so different from each other. We're all unique people. So you shouldn't feel like you have to change to align yourself with LGBTQ plus people that you see on TV or online, because you're allowed to just be you and be gay or be bisexual and not have to follow these certain rules or standards, because there are no rules or standards. You're just supposed to be you. Like I said, your sexuality, your gender identity is just a small part of who you are, and you shouldn't base your whole personality off of it or try to be a certain way so that you can be seen as a stereotypical person of that sexuality. You need to just be you and allow yourself to like the things that you like and dress the way that you like and be the sexuality and identify with the sexuality that feels comfortable for you. And the final thing that I want to say is you are not alone. As cliche as that may sound, it's true. I know that when you're figuring things out with your sexuality, it can feel really isolating, and you might feel like you're the only person in the world who's struggling with this or who's feeling the feelings that you are, but I promise you that you are not. At this very moment, as you're struggling with your sexuality, there are hundreds of thousands of other people doing the exact same thing, and every LGBTQ plus person has gone through what you're going through. I don't know, that just would have brought comfort to me to know that I wasn't the only person in the world having a hard time with what I was going through. All right, so I think that about wraps up what I wanted to say in this video. Like I said, these are things that would have been really helpful for me to know when I was figuring things out. So I hope that if you're figuring out your sexuality right now, that this was a little bit helpful. It's a really hard process, and I know how sucky it can feel sometimes, but I promise you that everything will work out and you'll figure things out eventually, and you're not going to be consumed by these feelings and these worries and this confusion forever. It's not going to be like that, I promise you. As always, if you have any other video requests, you can leave those down below because I like to make videos that you guys want to see. And thank you guys so much for watching this video. I will see you next week for another one. Bye guys.